I'm having a chat with the principal clarinetist of the Santa Barbara Symphony, Donald Foster. He's going to be playing the Aaron Copland Concerto for clarinet that those of us who are clarinetists and those of us who are conductors know is, ain't easy. There are complications. He's going to talk to us a little bit about that. This is going to be a program by the Santa Barbara Symphony coming up on, April 12th, Saturday evening at 8 o'clock, April 12th, Sunday afternoon, April 13th, at the Granada Theater in downtown Santa Barbara. Let me just put out the ticket number. That's my duty here. In Santa Barbara, area code 805. Telephone number for the Granada Theater box office, 899-2222. And Nir Cabaretti, the conductor of the Santa Barbara Symphony, has put together really a very interesting program. Mion, la création du monde, the creation of the world, a jazzy, wonderful, interesting kind of chamber work as well. Copland's Clarinet Concerto, which is also, as Donald will tell us, is written for a smaller ensemble. And then, just to top it all off after intermission, the gigantic, the huge, the magnificent Beethoven Symphony No. 7. So that ought to be one wonderful concert. And so let's get started, Don. You've been playing with the Santa Barbara Symphony, Pasadena Symphony. You do studio work in Los Angeles. Give me a ballpark. I think we talked earlier, something like 15 years you've been principal clarinet of the Santa Barbara Symphony, something like that?
Yeah, I just, in fact, last season got my little 15-year pin, as it were. They get these little paperweights. It's really beautiful and unexpected. My first thought was, wow, how generous. And then my second thought was, it's been 15 years.
and also busy with Pasadena Symphony. Yeah.
Yes, I've been playing, first joined the orchestra as a second clarinetist, and then later moved up to principal clarinet.
Now we're going to talk about the studio work because everybody's fascinated. You and I spoke a few minutes ago, and what I want to give the public is an idea of this magic of going into a studio, what it's like, and also about how you go in, you sight read, that's it, pretty much,
yeah.
Right? Because the money is money, time is money, literally.
Yes.
Give us an overview of the studio life in Los Angeles, the big city. For how many years have you been doing some studio work?
Oh, it's a good question. I would have to say I did my first job in the late 90s and then didn't do anything. And it was one of those cases where I knew the composer and I thought, wow, well, my life's going to change forever. And of course, the phone never rang again after that. And which begs the question that nobody really knows how it all works. I mean, we have immense respect for one another because the talent level is so incredibly high. And that's one of the great joys about playing in the studios is getting to hear your colleagues, I must say. It never fails to boggle the mind what these people can do with, like you mentioned, with no warning about the music, really. And so, you get a call and you show up to wherever, Sony or Fox, and you're exactly right. You just walk in. It's a beautiful soundstage, exactly how it was. For years, the acoustics have been sort of marveled. And you sit down, and there in front of you is a big fat book of music that you've never seen before. And with trepidation, you crack it open and kind of decide how your life is going to be for the next few days.
I thought
the great flutist Jim Walker, who retired a couple years ago from studio work, who still teaches flute at USC and is still soloing all over the world, has the greatest quote ever. He said that studio work is 95% boredom and 5% sheer terror. Mm-hmm. And it can be that way. I mean, there have been days where I will play 6 notes. Yeah. And then there are other days where you really think, I don't know if I can play this another time. Well, that's as good as it's going to get, kind of thing. But it's not for everybody. It's definitely a certain type of work. I also happen to be a huge film lover, genuinely. So I enjoy it from that aspect also because I enjoy the actual, film art. And so for me, it's just an added bonus.
And as you said, your colleagues, you and I talked about some of the people we both know in the industry. And when you get into the studios, you stay till you die.
Well, look, everyone has been fired. I mean, because the way it works is you're representing a contractor who is representing a client, basically. And you have to leave kind of your ego at the door. You have to have a certain amount of confidence, obviously, but the there has been numerous occasions where things just for whatever reason it's not a good marriage. And but you're right, with any luck, the phone will ring again. I mean, but I can't get into too much detail for fear of alienating myself, but there's one particular composer, for example, who's so famous for deciding, quote unquote, that he wants to use somebody else, that there's a running joke saying, "Oh yeah, I was fired by him last time," and oh well, maybe it's your time this time to be fired. And you just kind of have to have an air of humor about it, otherwise it's the kind of thing that'll just drive you nuts.
And it is. How about give me a little rundown of some of the films you have played clarinet in? Can you do that for me?
Absolutely. Well, the way we usually say it is we talk about how we have accounts, and usually those accounts are composers.
Oh.
And I'm extraordinarily lucky to have two biggies, and that's John Williams and Randy Newman. So I've done all of John's recent films dating back to the most recent Indiana Jones. And so there was a film that he was nominated for the Oscar recently for The Book Thief. And there are prominent clarinet solos, and I actually got screen credit for that one, which is the first time I've ever had that happen, which is very unusual. For Randy Newman, obviously all of his work with Pixar, Monsters University, Toy Story 3, these types of films, he's such an amazing composer and writes very generously for the clarinet. Also, we're in a golden age, or I should say a second golden age, maybe it's the fourth golden age if you ask some of the old timers, of television. And believe it or not, they're finally bringing orchestras back to the television soundtrack, and it's just great. I'm playing on two shows right now. Both, I better get this right. Yeah, both are on ABC. One is called Revenge, and the other is called Resurrection. And that's just been fantastic.
You mean by that a full orchestra?
Yeah.
Because remember
that 100 pieces, but
But I mean, there was a dry spell. I recall something
absolutely.
like 15, 20 years ago when you guys were all looking like, where are we going to get any work?
That's right. That's right. And it's slowly creeping back, and obviously that's a huge thing but not just for me. I think it's also for the audience. I think you can tell the difference.
Okay. By the way, did you play the John Carter score, that first John Carter film?
I think. No. I did.
Okay. I was just wondering because everybody all the people I know who played in that orchestra, they were so excited, they were convinced that one was going to have 2 or 3 or 4 sequels and right down the drain. Let's talk a little bit about the Copland Clarinet Concerto. I looked at the score when I was a kid, a conducting student in London. Scared me to death as a conductor. It's very, very tricky, let alone the clarinet part. Tell me a little bit about that concerto.
Well, it's one of the seminal clarinet pieces, right? And it's a unique situation because this was commissioned by Benny Goodman, and Benny Goodman, at a time was commissioning a bunch of quote classical composers to write him pieces, and when it came up for Copland, this piece is really fantastic, and when you learn the piece, Copland himself mentioned a couple of things. He knew that he wanted to have something, quote, jazzy. He didn't know what. He also decided that he wanted to have, some kind of cadenza. But then what really sort of befuddled him was how to start the piece. And he ended up writing the most beautiful thing, and at least even he said it was one of the most beautiful things he'd ever written, as the opening slow, what he called a pas de deux between the clarinet and the orchestra, and it truly is like a waltz dance, very slow, but it's just stunning. In the second half, of course, when it's lively, you mentioned the difficulty. Of course, it's not only technical, but it's also rhythmically very challenging. Lots of meter changes, and then just from part to part, since it's only written for strings, piano, harp, and clarinet, it's very intimate, so there's really not a whole lot of room for error.
Yeah. And that's what I remember as a conducting student. All those meter changes scared me to death. I think you mentioned before we went on air, it's almost in a way a little easier for the clarinetist to play than for the conductor to conduct.
Right. Well, I'll tell you. I've actually done this piece with Santa Barbara with Giselle Bendor.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
And
And I remembered then even because we don't get to solo a whole lot, clarinetists, and when we do, it's usually playing Mozart, which of course is one of the great pieces ever. And that piece I do from memory, not the couplet. And even though I probably have it memorized, there's too many potential things that might have to, you might have to suddenly let her be. And so I've learned early on to keep the music handy in performances for the Copeland because it's just fiendish.
Yeah.
It's just fiendish.
Yeah.
Now the good news is that it's worth it. Some pieces are so difficult that, what's the point kind of thing. But I think that this is worth it not only for the performers but for the audience.
Yeah, good. You're not playing in the Mio piece, are you? I mean, what are you?
No, in fact, I almost had issues with Maestro Cabaretti because he picked two of my other favorite pieces, Mio, Création, and then of course Beethoven 7, and I'm out for both of those.
Hey, you're the soloist. You get to sit in the other room. You drink
I
your wine.
understand, but I'm teasing. It and really, it's as you opened the interview, it's a fabulous program, just fantastic.
Yeah, Création du Monde, creation of the world. I remember from junior high school or something, just being intrigued. So it's a very jazzy program. First half, the Mio. Kind of the origins, if you will, 30s, 20s, 30s jazz, the French take that, of course, Americans ran to Paris to pick up and take back home, so to speak, at least the sophisticated levels of a jazz technique. Am I in trouble yet? And Copland, of course, was greatly influenced by the French composers of that period, the jazz influence in Paris, likewise, a good back and forth there. I got out of my conundrum there. Because, of course,
you did great.
I mean, jazz origins are American, and the French loved it, just like they loved Jerry Lewis. Come on.
That's right. Well, and not to interrupt you, but the whole jazz concept. What is it? What exactly makes something quote jazzy? And what it is, of course, is the rhythm. And then the Beethoven 7, not ironically, and I don't think accidentally, this da 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 da. This rhythm is incessant. And so you could argue that it was not necessarily a jazz foreshadowing, but it definitely was a rhythmic experiment. And it's just phenomenal.
Why didn't I think of that? That's absolutely brilliant, and it speaks also to I love Nir Cabaretti's programming. It's none of it is just thrown together. He's a very thoughtful programmer, and that's very interesting. It never occurred to I've been trying to figure out what is this connection to Beethoven 7, and you just hit the nail right on the head. Thank you.
Oh, glad I could be of help.
So here's the question. I was a clarinetist. We talked. I wanted to play flute. Somebody stuck a clarinet in my face because they thought it was more masculine. Give me a break. This is the late 50s. I played pretty good. I loved being a second clarinetist. The range is nice. You don't have to sweat too much, all that high register stuff. And then I went to Cal Arts. I was conducting, founded the Youth Symphony here, but I went to Cal Arts, and Richard Stoltzman, whom I started to study clarinet with, announced that we were all going to learn how to make clarinet reeds. And that's when, as I've said, I think, it was Nick Daniel, the oboist I spoke to a week or so ago. That was when I said, enough. But Nick said, there was a time when I was X years old, 8 or 9 or something, when my Grammy said, you will play the oboe. Now, do you have any experience like that? Did somebody say you will, or were you just totally turned on to the instrument as a kid?
No, it's such a non-romantic story. In fact, it's laughable. I had for some reason, there was no orchestra in my junior high school, so we were only allowed to sign up for band. And I remember that when I was told, well, you'll have to be renting your instrument, I remember my mom and I went to the local music store, and I just couldn't believe how expensive everything was. I had no clue, right? And so I just felt guilty. And in no way were we poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy either. But I just felt like, oh my gosh, these are ridiculous. And so I ended up going between the clarinet or the trumpet, literally because they were the cheapest to rent.
That is so unromantic, as you said.
I wish I had some sappy story. Now, the good news is that I have been in love with the orchestra ever since I could remember. I mean, I remember being 4 years old and having this one particular coloring book that had orchestral instruments, and I was obsessed with that thing. Long after I had finished coloring them, I was obsessed with that book. And I remember, when PBS used to broadcast much more frequently orchestral things, glued to that stuff when I was 5, 6 years old. I also had a neighbor who was a concert pianist who was getting her doctorate at USC, who would constantly be practicing. And my mom, I don't remember this, but my mom said very often when she couldn't find me, she knew where I was. I would be sitting on the front porch of this house listening to the woman practice. So I was obsessed with music from as long as I can remember.
Yeah. Who'd you study with at USC, clarinet?
For my undergrad, it was with Yehuda Gilad, who's probably the world's most sought-after clarinet teacher at the moment. And then for my master's, Michel Zukovsky, who's principal of the LA Phil.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to, it left my head, so I can't go there. But the other clarinet teacher at USC
was Mitchell Lurie.
There we go, Mitchell Lurie.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to work with him a number of times before he passed. It was great because the year I got into USC was his last year there, and so not enough time to give the man as many superlatives as he deserves. Just a phenomenal artist and man.
And I studied clarinet with him, took a couple lessons, and once again realized conducting was the way. So, I think we've about covered it. You've enlightened us about the studio environment. It's an amazing world down there in Los Angeles, the studio world, and everybody knows it. I'm going to put up the little clip of the NBC theme.
Okay.
Are you playing that one? I think because it's under your name. It comes up.
The nightly news one?
Yeah, the nightly news theme.
Yes.
It's a beauty. You never hear the whole piece.
Yeah.
And John Williams is conducting, and let's assume it's going to be right underneath this interview that you're in there playing. I think they show the clarinets kind of at a side angle. I couldn't figure out where you were or what you were, but anyway, just to give people an idea of the magic of the studio world, may I congratulate you. That's a beautiful way to make a living.
Oh, it's fantastic. I will say one other thing. I know we're short on time.
Yeah, no, go.
But don't forget that I also involve a lot of my time in teaching. But it's not the type of teaching that I think most of my colleagues have. I teach at a small community college in Moreno Valley, which is sort of near Riverside, halfway between Riverside and Palm Springs. And actually, I teach courses for non-majors. And this is truly my hidden love, if you want to know the truth. A long time ago, I kind of gave up the idea of teaching clarinet because it was very, let's just say, unfulfilling. It was a bit depressing. But then the idea
of people have students like me.
Well, I didn't, I'm sure. But I the idea now of teaching music appreciation or film music appreciation or music fundamentals to non-majors has totally rejuvenated my mantra with teaching, and I love it, and that's my other secret love. So between that and playing, I have carved a path, and so I thank you for the well wishes. That's
by
nice.
the way, carving a path, very important. And by the way, you obviously now I remembered that you were teaching at Moreno City College or junior college, but I had no idea what. And you're providing a great service. You're helping people who are not really necessarily going to pursue music to understand better.
Right.
This art of ours, and why all of us are crazy enough to, make that decision. It's a big decision. It's not getting rich on the stock market,
Oh no, it's woefully unpredictable, as obviously, and obviously there's some practical things. Teaching offers me some stability, benefits, blah blah blah, but also it's an incredibly rewarding experience. And again, not just because of the students, but also the colleagues. I mean, the number of phenomenal colleagues I have teaching in all sorts of disciplines in all different fields. It's just really great to be part of that kind of academic environment and doing sort of, this is what I preach, basically.
Well put, actually, and well done, and may I salute you and thank you, because that is the whole paradigm change that we're dealing with. We have to kind of reignite interest in this so-called classical music.
Absolutely.
In the arts. I mean, it's tough. Okay, I got to do the run through and then we're done. Thanks again for giving me a little time. I guess you're off to go somewhere, do something in a bit. Santa Barbara Symphony. the weekend of April 12th, Saturday evening at 8 o'clock, and Sunday, April 13th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Santa Barbara Symphony, Nir Cabaretti conducting. A very interesting program. I've never seen the Mio Creation of the World live, so I can't wait to see this. Mio Création du Monde. I've got to practice, my French a little bit. Copland Clarinet Concerto, intermission, and then slam bam, the incredible. I love that symphony. That's really one of my favorites. Beethoven Symphony No. 7. It's going to be a very, very exciting program. Tickets. I know a lot of people in Southern California watch this little interview show, I guess you'd say. So let me just give you the phone number in Santa Barbara. It's area code 805-899-2222. And as everybody knows, you come up, you have a lovely meal in downtown Santa Barbara. The weather's gorgeous, and then you catch a symphony concert in the Santa Barbara's little opera house, the Granada Theater. So it's going to be a wonderful weekend of concerts. I hope many, many people will take me up on this offer and see this. How come I forgot your name? Don Foster, clarinetist, principal clarinetist of the Santa Barbara Symphony, getting a chance, as he said earlier. It's not often that they pull him out of the wind section and give him a chance to stand up in front of the orchestra, the Copland Clarinet Concerto. I want to see that too. I want to just see how much Nir Cabaretti has to sweat through that one. I really want to see that. Don, thanks very much for giving me some time. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. This is fantastic.
Okay, see ya. Bye.
Take care.